class. I had a pretty good trip this weekend to the center of the Earth with Jules Verne. It was pretty good, and this is as you can see, a feed of bears feeding on salmon in the wilderness. We all know how that's related to the trees and hydropower in the Northwest. Today we're going to be talking about the Exxon Valdez oil spill. Does anyone have anything to say? Does anyone know anything? Who read the reading for last night? All right, Exxon oil spill Valdez, 1989. Maybe if I give you some background information, it could jog your memory.
So the Exxon Valdez oil spill took place in the Prince William Sound in Alaska on March 24th, 1989. What happened was the Exxon Valdez, which was an oil tanker, was setting out for Long Beach, California when it struck a reef within the sound. This released a lot of the oil that it had inside of the tanker out into the sound after running aground into the reef. And this happened around 12:04 a.m. And even though the estimates for the volume of oil leaked into the sound aren't exact, they are large. It's somewhere between 260,000 to 900,000 barrels of oil, of crude oil, into the sound. So this obviously had a large environmental impact to what was going on in the reef and the sound. There were a couple of causes that could be attributed to what actually led to the oil spill, or to the accident happening in the first place, but the main root cause could be led back to cutting corners for the corporation, Exxon's cutting corners with spending. The crew was reported to have been tired from being overworked, as there wasn't a sufficient crew or not enough people being staffed by Exxon in order to maintain running the ship in a way that it needed to be staffed. Insufficient staff led to overworked crew members, which led to problems when it came to actually getting to operate the boat the way it needed to be. There were also other cuts with spending on radar, which would have actually helped identify where the reef was and lead to would have helped avoid this from happening in the first place.
So now that I've given you some background information, what are some of the ethical implications and dilemmas that were faced in this situation?
Yes, Bryce?
Yeah, I actually know a couple of those ethical issues. Why don't you ask me to tell the class?
All right, step up.
There are a number of different ethical issues and different factors that affected the outcome of this Exxon Valdez oil spill. A lot of them have been enumerated by MIT and a number of different organizations when they are now analyzing this case. Number one was something that was very important, but ships were not informed that the previous practice of the Coast Guard tracking ships out to Bligh Reef had ceased. That was important because they didn't have any inspections out there, which maintained and allowed the Exxon Valdez to have an inadequate amount of crew. Number two, the oil industry promised but never installed state-of-the-art iceberg monitoring equipment. That's something that's very important because that will, if you did have any kind of inadequate crew, you had some fail-safe mechanisms to potentially still avoid a catastrophe. Number three, the Exxon Valdez was actually sailing outside the normal sea lane to avoid small icebergs thought to be in that area. So that was something that they actually attempted through human error to switch out of that sea lane, but that ended up creating more problems.
And those are just a few of the ethical issues that we have been faced when a crisis like this comes up. But, I'll pass it back to you, Dr. Newberry. Thanks for letting me take the time.
Yeah, very good, Bryce. All right, so now that Bryce has told us about some of the ethical dilemmas, we could start talking about some of the solutions. Does anyone have anything to say on possible solutions? Anyone? All right, does anyone have any solutions? Yes, no.
Yeah, I think I got a couple of solutions.
All right, why don't you share with the class?
Thanks, Doc. Neil.
Of course.
All right.
Okay, so the ethical and moral solutions can be broken up into two parts, one being the company solutions and one being the public solutions. The company solutions involve the following. First, the company shouldn't have cut corners to save money, especially when having large environmental impacts at stake. Next, the company should have focused on having sufficient communication between the captain and corporate members, and also ensuring that operators have a sufficient skill set to be able to complete their jobs. A lot of the members on the crew were inebriated in some way, and they should have been held to higher standards and kept in the best physical state. Finally, Exxon should have provided the boat should have equipped the boat with all tools necessary to complete their job. Some of this includes RACAs, which were essentially iceberg radars that would have helped the ship prevent from running aground. And finally, an improvement in systematic tugboats would have helped the boat as well. Public solutions to this spill occurring at Prince William Sound involved many systematic failures. This eventually led to Alaskan legislation requiring oil tankers to be pulled by 2 tugboats instead of 1. It appears that government regulation is the significant component for preventing these oil spills, as clearly there seems to be insufficient incentive for the private companies to be more cautious. From what we have seen, government has gone soft on penalizing private companies for environmentally damning oil catastrophe. It is up to the public to demand that the costs of environmental damage be accounted for in other oil costs.